Welcome everyone to MailFuzz TV. I am Peter and today I'm going to be talking about Station 11, Episode 6. It's called Survival Is Insufficient. So spoilers for the episode. This is a Patreon-sponsored review, so thanks to Allison for picking this show. I went into this one with muted expectations because this show has established a cadence of the odd-numbered episodes being pretty good and then the even-number episodes not being that exciting. The even-numbered episodes being the ones in the future with adult Kirsten and the prophet and all that stuff going on. And this is one of those episodes, so now I have this almost built-in expectation of what this is. And I think to its credit, there was a few visuals in the first 10 minutes of this episode that I did quite enjoy. The billboard on fire was a really pretty visual. The flare gun shot of all the different colors of flares flying through the sky, that stuff looked really good. And there's even some really great music in the first half of this episode. In particular, there's a moment where Kirsten's reading the book again and she's thinking back to the moment she was looking for Javan, and that was good. I mean, it was almost a bit too good in the sense that it was so dramatic with the music that I didn't really understand why we were jumping to an 11 in terms of emotion in that moment. It didn't really feel like the moment had earned that amount of emotion, but the music on its own and the way it was edited together was very good. I just don't know if it justified why we were doing that at that moment. But I think, I'm still very mixed on this episode, as I have been with all the even-numbered episodes. I think I was looking forward to the reaction to what happened at the end of episode 4 with the child suicide bombers. And honestly, for the most part, I feel very underwhelmed by everything related to that. Sarah does feel very distraught because Tobias died, right? She seems to be drinking herself to death because of it. But honestly, the vibe from everyone else just doesn't feel like it's really all that there. It feels either like they're just kind of not really paying attention to it. In fact, it turns out a little bit into the episode that Alex didn't run away, right? She just ended up being in a different part of the compound or whatever. She's just there, even though Kirsten and I think Saeed's the other guy's name went looking for her. And she doesn't seem to know what's happened at all. No one seems to have mentioned to her that there was a suicide bombing last night. And when they get to a little bit later on, someone says, "Oh, hey, you, did you make plans with that prophet guy?" And she's like, "Yeah, I made plans with him back in the, whatever city, but Kirsten stabbed him, so it didn't happen." And the other guy's like, "Yeah, did you thank her? Because he uses child soldiers." And Alex is like, "Huh?" She just gives a look. You don't even get any more of the conversation, but it definitely implies that in the time since she's came back into this episode, no one has mentioned that there was a suicide bombing the night before, which killed someone. That just felt kind of weird to me. And even just the overall vibe of the group didn't feel like it was just in a place. It felt like they should be all scared. They should all be terrified, especially since the prophet seems to kind of call them all out with all those crosses with the names saying, "Hey, we're going to kill all of you." And even as the episode went on, I was wondering if even the suicide bomber kids were even from him in a weird way. I thought it was setting up maybe something else because it was almost like trying to make us sympathize with what his group is, the Undersea. But I thought it never came up. No one ever really seemed to talk about it. So I guess they were just his. But because it kind of sounded like at one point the prophet, because we do see him again in this episode, that he wants to get back into this Museum of Civilization, which is confirmed this episode that it is the airport, right? Which we obviously spent a long time last episode dealing with. And that's fine, that makes sense, that's what I was expecting. And it sounds like he's saying, "Oh, your friends are in danger because of where they are," almost implying that place has went bad, that, maybe they've all turned into cannibals or something and they just bring people in to kill them, or something else, right? Maybe they're going to do something bad to them. However, everything in the last episode with the backstory, showed him as a little psychopath, a little sociopath, and all the people inside the airport seemed like they were building a reasonable community. Now, maybe they have lost their minds, maybe something bad has happened. There is the weird question mark of Costanoli's character, who we saw at the start of last episode but seemed to disappear, and he kind of addresses it in this episode, vaguely, but he says that he left for a while, but he came back, and he doesn't remember anything from the time before, but he's been happy here since. Does that suggest some brainwashing is happening at the airport or something. They've turned into like weird homicidal dictators or something. I don't know, but it almost felt like he was trying to at least convince Kirsten that the Museum of Civilization, the airport, and the group there are very bad. And he wants Kirsten's help to infiltrate as two final actors going in so he can get his hands on something. It sounds like he's going after maybe the tablet with all the information on it, judging from some conversations that the other kids have with Kirsten later in the episode. My assumption right now is that he's stretching the truth, or he's even outright lying about the museum, and that maybe they're fine, or maybe they're kind of bad, but everyone's kind of bad, so it's not really that they're worse than him necessarily. But it feels like, for whatever reason, he's now decided, after building up an army of children, that he wants to go back in there and take something. Maybe he wants to take back the airport as a whole, but certainly it seems like he wants to take back at least some of the technology. Possibly just to destroy it so that no one has it, rather than because he wants it for himself, because he's devout in all these beliefs about the people from before not mattering, and it's all about the future generations or whatever. I do have to say, though, that when it was getting to all this stuff, when it was getting to like Kirsten encountering all the kids that are waiting in the field for her and all sticking their heads up and then taking her to their master, and we find out that there's no other adults in this group, right? It's just the prophet. Everyone else is younger. It's all people who were born after the pandemic or the apocalypse, whatever you want to call it. And I appreciated that Kirsten did immediately just go to kill him again and squeezes his wound at one point and effectively only agrees to kind of work with him because she's now been convinced that in some way her group is in danger. And we do see in the other scenes that they are lured to this museum, right? Now, whether or not it's actually a danger is another question. When they get there, right, because they're told the other half, the musicians that split up from them, are already there. And it's pissing a rain. They don't know what to do, and like, you know what, this sounds like a great idea. They've got shelter and warmth and whatever else, let's go with them. And they do, and when they get there, we see it's the airport, and they're told that they have to quarantine for a little while, which makes some sense, right? So they're staying sort of around where the tarmac is, and they're hanging about there, and they're being kept separate from everyone else, and they're going to have food sent down. Obviously, Sarah also has maybe a heart attack towards the end of the episode. But the quarantine doesn't seem unreasonable. Now, admittedly, I don't know how prevalent the virus still is this far after the apocalypse in terms of like it still being spread around by humans because there's so few of them left, relatively speaking. But fair enough, they're making them quarantine. They've not done anything too bad yet. Now, are they technically all prisoners? They might be, and if they are all prisoners, then we can maybe explore that in some way and see what happens to them. But yeah, I think that was probably my big thing with this episode, is that it was trying to really play this sort of who can we as the audience trust, who can Kirsten trust. And the problem is that any notion of trusting the prophet, or David, if you want to just call him that, is that, no, we saw him as a kid last episode and he was already a sociopath, so I don't believe that he's good in any way, shape, or form. I could believe that everyone else has also went bad, potentially. That's fine. Like that fits the bleak world that we're in. We also have another group called the Red Bandanas that show up. The cliffhanger at the end is about this group attacking Kirsten, David, and the kids. The one kid that she was talking to gets stabbed and seemingly is dying at the end. And that's her big moment at the end. But there are some teases, of course, in that conversation. I didn't really feel too much for the action sequence that takes place here. I thought it was, in terms of direction, one of the weaker parts of the episode. It just wasn't that exciting. It does kind of the slow motion, emotional stuff where there's someone crying and the music's swelling. It does that quite well, this show. Action scenes where there's fighting, less so. But when she's talking to the kid beforehand, the kid basically says that, he hopes the prophet survives so that the traveling symphony survives. And she questions that and is like, wait, why would the symphony die if David dies? And he says something to the effect of, oh, he's going to bring in all of the undersea that he's built up around the country with a signal, and if he's dead, then her group will be killed or something to that effect. That's okay, all right, okay, I guess. I think that's my thing here, is that so much of this prophet stuff and what the characters stand for, what side anyone's on, is like I can see why they think it would be compelling, but I don't really find it that compelling. I'm kind of waiting for some solid footing so that I just know who I'm rooting for, and I know what characters I'm hoping kind of make it out. They do try and add some more emotional connection here for why Kirsten cares so much about Alex. The opening scene shows her taking care of Alex as a baby, or more specifically, having lost her as a baby and running around all the golf carts trying to find her. And then Tobias luckily already has her. And he talks about the red bandanas setting them up for later in the episode. But, you know, it does a couple of things there. It reminds you of this character who's just died at the end of the, well, not the last episode, technically. It was the episode before. But he's died, so we see him again to remind us of his existence and feel bad about the fact that he's dead, and then set up why Kirsten's so protective of her family and stuff. Like, she was literally taking care of Alex as a baby when she was only like 12 or 13, and that's a bond that obviously is quite strong. That makes sense. I get it. You know, it's totally fine. But from there, like, all these groups that are in this world, the Undersea, the Traveling Symphony, the Red Bandanas, the Civilization of Humanity, right? There's a lot of things going on here, and I mean, the Red Bandanas are the least out of all of them. They've barely been mentioned at this point, right? We've heard about them the least out of any of these groups. But all of this is going on, and I don't know who I'm really rooting for right now. I think part of the problem is that it was very easy to kind of like care about Kid Kirsten, and I think Kid Kirsten is the stronger Kirsten, and that's nothing against Mackenzie Davis, who I think is a good actress. But I don't think adult Kirsten's had as much chemistry with anyone around her as much as the kid Kirsten had with Javan. I think that was a lot more of a heartwarming relationship than anything that's been in the future stuff. And likewise, I think Miranda's story was more heartwarming, and I think the civilization building up in the airport was a more interesting story last time. Admittedly, the David element was a little bit more murky for me. But I think because of that, I'm having trouble really having someone that I care about a great deal in this future stuff right now. And I think it doesn't help that all of Kirsten's kind of drama has been tied, well, at least the last episode we got of her. Because again, keep in mind, this is only technically the third episode of this future stuff, right? This is only the third one because it's every other episode. But the last episode with all the future characters, it was so much of the bickering between her and Alex, and it didn't really draw me in and make me really care about the fact that she cares about the people around her. I think there was maybe some other tweaks in the writing they could have maybe done to make me really latch on to her wanting to protect her family. As it is right now, I'm not really that attached to the Traveling Symphony, and then on top of that, it's really hard to know exactly what the motives are of some of these other groups and characters. They're really playing up the mystery of what the civilization in the airport has become. And I get it, and that's fine, but right now, because I'm so conflicted or unengaged with what the Prophet and his group are, it's it's hard to really find where I am emotionally with the characters and who I'm rooting for, what I care about right now in terms of the story. So it's still a problem I'm having with the future stuff in the show. It's probably worth mentioning that David, or the Prophet, talks to Kirsten by the campfire when they've been traveling towards the end of the episode, and kind of opens up a little bit about his dad and Miranda, and the idea that she, the whole time they were together, could understand Spanish, but his dad would say things about her on the phone in front of her in Spanish. And when she admitted after the fact, after they split up, that she could speak Spanish and had a conversation with him in Spanish, she basically pointed out that he just never asked anything about her, about herself, which obviously shows the selfishness, perhaps. Although, now that I'm thinking about it, I feel like he did ask about her when he first met her, right? I feel like he tried to ask about her. I could be misremembering those scenes, but I feel like he tried to, and she kind of shot him down. And it sounds like he just never tried again, which, again, is still a shitty thing, but it's definitely interesting that his image of his dad has really shaped a lot of things. But what's key here is that David doesn't know why Kirsten knows the book, or why she knows the prophecy of the book. He theorizes that maybe she's encountered one of the kids of the Undersea along her travels, and that's where she learned it from. And Kirsten just says no. So David does not know that she has a copy of the book on her. I feel like that may be quite important to him, especially since he mentions that he lost it, and it's been stuck in his mind ever since. To the point where she even kind of corrects him on one of the details, and says that the character in the spacesuit's the girl who's in a time loop or something like that. I don't know if that's a hint for what the show's going to do, but certainly it feels like, you know, he has a new understanding of it, at least to a certain extent, based on that interaction. I think the other strange thing for me is that Kirsten never directly addresses the threat of all the crosses, or even directly brings up the fact that he used children as suicide bombers, and that's why I was thinking it might be building up to a reveal where he didn't actually send those kids, because they're kind of avoiding the subject almost as a show. But it's kind of weird when she confronts him. You know, the kids take her up to that little, it's like a construction site or a plant, and there's like this little booth that he's staying in while he's injured. And Kirsten goes up, and obviously she takes out the knife and whatnot. But in all that conversation, she never brings up, hey, you just murdered someone with children's suicide bombers. I feel like that's something that I would confront him with and say, you're a monster, you just did this. What the hell? That's absolutely, like, ridiculous. And it almost made me think it was going to turn out to be someone else who sent the kids. And maybe it still will be, but it also felt like they just never went back to it and talked about it. It feels so weird for her to never ask about that, or directly address the fact that all those crosses were made in front of the fire with all the stones with all the traveling symphonies names on them. Like, that's so strange not to bring up, and it left me feeling very frustrated. I'm like, why aren't you asking this question? Like, I guess sometimes you have mysteries and you don't want to, like, give too much away too soon, but it makes no sense in this context why the character isn't bringing these things up and saying, you, like, why would I help you? You've threatened the entire group. You left this imagery. And it almost does make me think that there's going to be a swerve where him and his group didn't do this. Maybe it was the Red Bandanas. Maybe it was the Civilization Museum who are trying to lure them into this trap, if it is a trap. But it almost feels that they can't have her ask him about it yet, because when he reacts to it, it's going to reveal that it wasn't him, and that will spoil another reveal that they don't want to do until later. So maybe they're saving it until she brings it up in the next episode or something. But that's frustrating to me. I was really finding myself feel frustrated when they were interacting and she wasn't directly bringing some of this really big stuff up that had just happened to her into her group, and she thinks he's responsible for it. So, yeah, you've got this idea that she's going to have to protect him in order to protect her group, because she considers that her family and she wants to protect them. We know she's very protective of everyone around her. She has been ever since she was a kid, because she lost so many people as a child, and that makes sense for the character. That core idea I could see working. I can see this idea of, like, having to, like, make a deal with the devil, make it work with the bad guy, and you have to keep him alive. You know, like a dumb action movie might have the bad guy has like a sensor with his heart, where if he dies and the heart stops beating, a bomb will blow up somewhere else and kill innocent people. It's kind of like that. She has to keep him alive, not because she wants to, but because she has to protect other people. That's potentially an interesting situation for her to be in, and to have to go against these other forces that, again, right now, we don't know if they are actually bad, or they're good, or they're neutral, or they're just bad from David's perspective. And, you know, we don't know right now. We're kind of left in this spot where we only know where we left them off at the airport last episode. But they're definitely shrouding it in mystery. Certainly that one character saying, hey, I don't remember the time before, but I've been very happy here since, certainly is building up, like, some intrigue about, okay, what is this place now? What has it evolved into over the past 20 years? Either way, you know, these are questions that exist. I don't know if I'm excited by the questions per se right now, and I think that's partly because of how this story in the future section is presented. But as expected, I did not enjoy this one as much as 5 or 3 or 1, right? This was definitely 2, 4, 6 levels of quality. It's really weird. And I expect at some point this has to change, where the themes of both the past stuff and the future stuff both have to kind of coalesce and be more relevant to each other as we get towards the conclusion. Obviously, we're 6 episodes in now out of 10. I expect 7's probably you know, a flashback episode. 8's probably back in this future timeline. But presumably, going towards 9 and 10, maybe it has to change. Although maybe not. I mean, if the even numbers are the one in the future, you would assume the end of the story has to be in the future, and that would naturally... Episode 10's an even number, so it would end in the future. So maybe it won't change. Maybe it won't shake up its formula as we get to the end. So yeah, still very mixed and 50-50 on the show as a whole. Not really feeling the future stuff all that much. And I feel like my opinion of that has just been solidified with each episode that we've had in the future, because, you know, the longer it goes and I'm still not caring anymore, by and large, the more I notice that I'm not caring anymore, and the more I feel like it's failing to hook me on that stuff. And it contrasts quite significantly from all the odd-numbered episodes that I think are much stronger, even when they're not perfect. Like I say, episode 5 was not perfect, right? The David Kidd stuff was the weakest part of that episode, but there was still a lot more overall to really enjoy, I think. But yeah, that's my feelings on episode 6 of Station 11. I will be back in a couple of weeks with my feelings on episode 7. So let me know what you thought of this episode in the comments. Like, subscribe, all the usual stuff. Helps out a bunch if you do. And of course, you can support all the content over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and help keep it coming. But thank you very much for joining me. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?